At 30, I thought love had forgotten me. Every heartbreak left scars I couldn't hide. Then he appeared, confident, older, a billionaire who should have been out of my reach. Yet somehow, he saw me. I didn't know if I should trust him, but my heart whispered, maybe love had returned. Before I share how he changed everything for me, don't forget to subscribe and stay with me till the end. You'll see how love finds you when you least expect it. Before he entered my life, my world was small, quiet, and predictable, almost painfully so. I lived in a modest apartment on the edge of the city, the kind of place where the walls seemed to remember every sigh, every silent tear. Every night I came home to nothing but the echo of my own footsteps. My mornings were simple. Wake up, get dressed, head to work. My evenings were even simpler. A quick dinner, maybe some television, then scrolling through my phone until I grew tired enough to fall asleep. It wasn't a bad life, but it was empty. There was no thrill, no laughter filling the spaces, no one waiting to ask how my day had been. I used to joke with myself that I had become invisible. In my 20s, I had been full of hope, full of ideas about love, convinced that marriage and happiness were just around the corner. But by the time I turned 30, reality had worn me down. My past relationships had left me cautious, even bitter. There was Mark, who swore I was his future, but disappeared when commitment became real. Then there was Anthony, who pretended to love me, but really loved the attention of everyone else. And then the worst of them, James. He didn't just leave, he broke me in ways I didn't even know I could be broken. His betrayal taught me that trusting someone could feel like handing them a weapon and hoping they didn't use it. After James, I promised myself I wouldn't give anyone that power again. I told my friends I was fine, that I was focusing on myself. And in a way, I was. I threw myself into work, into routines, into the safety of knowing nothing unexpected could happen to me. But late at night, when the world was quiet, I would feel the weight of my own loneliness pressing down. I wanted to be strong, to believe I didn't need anyone, but the truth was, I wanted love. I craved it, even when I pretended I didn't. Sometimes I would stand in front of the mirror, studying my reflection. At 30, I didn't feel old, but I felt behind, like life had been running forward without me, leaving me stranded while everyone else celebrated engagements, weddings, and babies. Social media didn't help. Every scroll reminded me of what I didn't have. The photos of smiling couples, anniversary captions, romantic getaways. It all felt like a cruel reminder. My family tried to comfort me in their own way, but their well-meaning words cut deep. Don't worry, your time will come. They didn't understand that waiting was the hardest part. Still, I kept moving. Day by day, I taught myself to live in the quiet. I went to work, kept my head down, smiled when I needed to, and buried the ache when it became too much. I didn't expect anything extraordinary. If anything, I thought the most exciting part of my 30s would be learning how to be okay on my own. And maybe, if I was lucky, I would find small joys, a new hobby, a good book, a weekend trip to clear my head. But deep down, beneath all my defenses, there was still a flicker of hope. I wouldn't admit it to anyone, not even to myself, but a part of me still believed in love. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, but I wanted to be proven wrong. I wanted someone to look at me and see more than just a woman past 30. I wanted someone to see my heart. I didn't know then that life was already preparing something for me, that the man who would turn everything upside down was closer than I could imagine. A man who didn't just walk into my life, he collided with it, and nothing would ever be the same again. It happened on a day I least expected, like most things in life that truly matter. I wasn't dressed up, I wasn't prepared, and I certainly wasn't looking for anything. It was just a regular afternoon, the kind that blurred into all the others. I had ducked into a little coffee shop near my office, the kind of place I often went to escape the monotony of my routine. The smell of roasted beans, the faint hum of conversation, and the soft music playing in the background gave me a small comfort I had grown to depend on. I stood in line, scrolling through my phone, when I felt someone step behind me. I didn't pay much attention at first, but then a deep, steady voice broke the silence between us. "You come here often, don't you?" I looked up, startled, and found myself staring into a pair of eyes that seemed to study me with genuine interest. He was taller than most men I'd ever met, dressed simply but with a kind of elegance that wasn't forced. His presence was commanding, but not in a way that felt intimidating. It was subtle, natural, as though the room adjusted to him without him even trying. I laughed nervously. "That obvious?" I asked, trying not to sound embarrassed. He smiled, not the arrogant, self-assured smile I had come to expect from men who thought too highly of themselves, but a warm, disarming one. "Not obvious," he replied. "Just familiar. Like you belong here." Something about the way he said it made me pause. I wasn't used to being noticed like that, not lately at least. I brushed it off, ordered my coffee, and thought that would be the end of it. But he didn't just disappear like strangers usually do. He stepped forward, ordered his own drink, and then, without asking, sat at the table across from mine. I wanted to roll my eyes, to assume he was just another man trying his luck. But there was something different in the way he carried himself, something unspoken yet undeniable. His questions weren't the usual shallow ones. He asked about my day, what I did for work, if I liked this part of the city. He listened, really listened, like my words mattered. It caught me off guard. At first, I kept my guard up. Years of heartbreak had trained me to be cautious. I didn't trust easily, especially not men who looked like they had everything. And he did. His watch, though understated, was worth more than I made in a year. His car keys, resting casually on the table, belonged to a brand I had only ever admired from afar. Everything about him whispered wealth, power, success. Men like him didn't notice women like me, and yet, here he was. When I finally asked what he did, he chuckled softly, almost like he didn't want to answer. "I work in investments," he said vaguely, leaving it at that. I didn't push, though part of me wondered. There was no arrogance in his tone, no attempt to impress. In fact, it seemed like he wanted me to see him as just a man, not whatever title or fortune followed him outside those cafe walls. We sat there for what felt like hours, though it was probably less than 30 minutes. Our conversation flowed with an ease I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't rehearsing my responses or worrying about how I sounded. I was just myself, and he seemed to like that version of me. When he finally stood to leave, he looked me in the eyes and said, "I hope this isn't the last time we talk." My heart skipped, but I nodded casually, pretending to be unfazed. After all, men say things all the time. But as I watched him walk away, something inside me whispered that this wasn't ordinary. This wasn't just a chance encounter. Little did I know, this was the beginning of a story that would unravel every wall I had built around my heart. A story that would test me, change me, and ultimately make me believe again. I didn't expect to see him again. Honestly, I thought our conversation at the cafe would fade like so many other small moments in my life. Sweet, but temporary. But fate has a strange way of working. A few days later, I walked into the same coffee shop, and there he was, sitting at the same corner table, almost like he had been waiting. When his eyes met mine, he smiled in that warm, unhurried way that made the rest of the world feel less overwhelming. He waved me over, and against my better judgment, I sat down. What surprised me was how easy it felt to talk to him again. There was no pressure, no hidden agenda I could sense. He asked about the little things, my favorite books, my dream vacation, the foods I could never get tired of. It felt strange, being asked questions that weren't meant to impress, but to understand. Over the next few weeks, he became a quiet constant in my life. Sometimes it was coffee, other times a walk through the park after work. He never pushed, never rushed me, and little by little, I started looking forward to seeing him. His presence was steady, calming, like a safe harbor after years of storms. But with every step closer, my doubts grew louder. He was a billionaire. I found out soon enough. It wasn't something he flaunted, but the signs were impossible to miss once I noticed. The cars, the phone calls that spoke of deals worth millions, the way people treated him with deference whenever we stepped into certain places. I couldn't help but wonder, why me? Out of all the women he could have, why choose someone like me? That question haunted me. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was temporary, that he would eventually get bored and move on. So I kept a part of myself guarded, even while another part longed to trust him. He noticed, of course. One evening, as we sat watching the city lights, he said softly, "You don't have to be afraid with me." The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten. I wanted to believe him, but fear is stubborn. Still, I couldn't deny the way my heart leapt whenever he laughed, or the comfort I felt when he remembered details about me no one else ever had. Like how I always ordered tea when I was nervous, or how I hummed quietly when I was lost in thought. He saw me in ways no one else had before, not as someone broken, not as someone behind in life, but as someone worth knowing. And slowly, almost against my will, I began to believe he might be different. As much as I wanted to believe in what we were building, the doubts never truly left me. They lingered like shadows, whispering in the back of my mind every time I let myself feel happy. I couldn't shake the question, why me? I wasn't rich. I wasn't glamorous. I wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads when she entered a room, but he was the kind of man who drew attention effortlessly. Everywhere we went, eyes followed him. People greeted him with admiration or envy. Women especially noticed him. And why wouldn't they? He had everything: power, confidence, and a life most people could only dream about. And then there was me, ordinary, 30, carrying scars no one could see. At first, it was just little things: a look from someone across the room, a whispered comment I overheard when we attended a dinner together. "She's not his type. How long do you think this will last?" They probably didn't mean for me to hear, but I did, and once those words settled in my chest, they weighed heavy. Even my own mind turned against me. At night, lying awake, I imagined scenarios where he would wake up one morning and realize I wasn't enough, that he would see me clearly and regret choosing me. The fear was paralyzing, and I hated how vulnerable it made me. He noticed, of course. He always noticed. One evening, after a charity event where I felt completely out of place among glittering gowns and polished smiles, he found me sitting quietly by myself. "You're miles away," he said gently, sitting beside me. I forced a smile. "Just tired." But he didn't buy it. He studied me for a long moment before saying, "You think you don't belong in my world, don't you?" I froze. His words cut through me because they were exactly what I had been thinking. I looked away, ashamed. "I don't," I whispered. "Look at them. All those women, the people you deal with every day. You could have anyone. Why me?" There was silence, and for a moment I regretted saying it out loud. But then he reached for my hand, his touch firm but tender. "Because you're real," he said simply. "You don't want me for what I have. You see me, the man, not the billionaire." Do you know how rare that is? His words should have silenced my fears, but doubt isn't erased that easily. Still, something in his voice stayed with me, like a thread of truth I couldn't ignore. He wanted me, not the perfect, polished version of me I thought I needed to be, but the woman sitting right there, flawed, uncertain, scarred. Even so, I wasn't sure how to quiet the shadows completely. Love, I was learning, was as much about fighting your own fears as it was about opening your heart to someone else. And mine was only just beginning. It was a rainy evening, the kind of night when the city feels quieter, softer, as if the world is pausing just long enough to listen. I remember sitting by my window, watching raindrops race down the glass, when my phone buzzed. It was him. His message was short. Come outside. I hesitated. It had been a rough week. My insecurities had been eating at me more than usual, and I'd even considered pulling back, telling him maybe this wasn't working. Part of me feared that he would eventually grow tired of my doubts, and I wanted to leave before he had the chance to confirm it. But curiosity won. I grabbed my coat and went downstairs, and there he was, standing in the rain, waiting for me like something out of a scene I'd only ever watched in movies. His hair and suit were soaked, but he didn't care. When I rushed toward him, half worried and half confused, he just smiled and said, I needed to see you. I remember staring at him, speechless. You're drenched, I blurted, but he shook his head. That doesn't matter. You matter. Something shifted in me in that moment. The way he looked at me, steady, unwavering, felt different from anything I'd known before. It wasn't desire or convenience or the shallow charm I had experienced with men in the past. It was something deeper, something that terrified me because it felt real. He took my hand, his voice quiet but firm. I know you're scared. I know you doubt this. Doubt me. Doubt yourself. But I need you to believe me when I say, I'm here. Not for a season, not for fun. For real. The rain poured harder, drenching us both, but all I could feel was his words sinking into me, reaching the part of my heart I had buried under years of pain. Tears mixed with the rain on my face, though I didn't even realize I was crying until he gently brushed my cheek. I don't need perfection, he whispered. I don't need you to be anything other than who you are. That's the woman I care for. That's the woman I choose. No one had ever spoken to me like that. No one had ever seen me, not as a project, not as a stepping stone, not as a mistake, but as someone worthy just as I was. In that moment, the walls I had built so carefully began to crack. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, love could be different this time, that it could be safe, that it could last. That night became the turning point, the moment I realized he wasn't just a man passing through my story. He was becoming part of it. And for the first time in years, the thought of giving my heart away didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom. After that night in the rain, something inside me softened. It wasn't immediate. I didn't suddenly erase all my fears or silence every voice in my head. But it was the first time I truly let myself believe that maybe he wasn't going anywhere. And that tiny seed of belief grew, slowly but steadily, every time he showed up for me. The weeks that followed felt different, lighter. We began to spend more time together, not in grand gestures or extravagant displays, but in the small, quiet ways that mattered most. He would call me in the middle of the day just to ask if I'd eaten. He'd show up with my favorite snack after a long shift, as if he knew exactly what my soul needed. We'd sit together in silence sometimes, no pressure to fill the air with words, just two people existing comfortably in each other's presence. It was in those little things that I started to see what love could really be. Not fireworks, not endless drama, not the roller coaster highs and devastating lows I had grown used to, but steadiness, peace, safety. I didn't realize how much I craved that until I felt it. Still, surrendering wasn't easy. I had spent years protecting myself, building walls around my heart, telling myself that if I kept love at a distance, it couldn't hurt me again. But he was patient. He never forced me to rush. He never demanded more than I was ready to give. And with each passing day, I found myself lowering those walls, brick by brick. I remember one evening in particular. We were sitting in his home, not the glossy, intimidating mansion people might imagine, but his private study, warm and filled with books. He handed me a blanket because I was cold, and without thinking, I leaned against him. It was such a simple thing, but the way he wrapped his arm around me, the way he held me like it was the most natural thing in the world, that was the moment I realized I was already his, even if I hadn't admitted it to myself yet. That night when he kissed me, it wasn't passionate or rushed. It was slow, careful, almost reverent, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. And in that moment, I felt the truth settle deep in my chest. He wasn't trying to take my heart. He was asking for it. And for the first time in years, I wanted to give it. Of course, the fear didn't disappear overnight. Old scars don't vanish just because someone new treats you better. There were nights I still lay awake, terrified of losing him, terrified of waking up to find it was all a dream. But every time I wavered, he reminded me, through actions more than words, that he was real, that this was real. Slowly, I started to let go of the idea that love had to hurt to be real, that I had to earn someone's affection by being perfect. With him, I was enough just as I was. And that realization was both terrifying and liberating. Surrendering to love didn't feel like falling this time. It felt like arriving, like coming home to a place I didn't know I had been searching for all along. So I gave my heart away, not in desperation, not in fear, but in trust, in hope, in love. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. Looking back now, it's almost surreal. Just a few years ago, I was convinced love wasn't meant for me. I had built a life around that belief, convincing myself I was fine being alone, that maybe some hearts just weren't meant to be chosen. But then, at 30, I met a man who reminded me that timing doesn't follow our rules, that sometimes love shows up late, when you've already given up hope, when you're least prepared to receive it. And it doesn't always come wrapped in the way you imagined. It comes quietly, through kindness, patience, and the courage of someone who refuses to let you keep hiding. Being with him hasn't been about wealth or status or the fairy tale image people think of when they imagine a billionaire. It's been about the way he makes me feel safe in my own skin, the way he listens, the way he chooses me, not in grand declarations, but in the quiet, everyday ways that prove love is action, not just words. I used to think giving my heart away was dangerous, that it meant losing myself. But I've learned it can also mean finding yourself again, through the eyes of someone who truly sees you. And at 30, when I thought it was too late, love found me anyway.